Okay, imagine for a second that someone promises to make you incredibly wealthy. And I don't mean some slow, steady 10-year investment plan. Actually, scratch that. I'm not even talking about a one-year plan. Imagine they promise to make you rich in exactly 45 days. Sounds completely impossible, right? Well, that is exactly what thousands of people thought too, right up until they actually saw their neighbors getting paid. Welcome to today's Explainer, the architecture of deceit, the Charles Ponzi story. We're going to dive right into how one man went from having absolutely nothing to becoming one of the richest people in America in just a matter of months. And we're going to do it by breaking down the exact, terrifying mechanics of his empire.
50%. And I'm not talking about a hopeful maybe if the market is good estimate. This was a rock-solid, absolute guarantee. The promise was that you could hand over your money and see a 50% profit in just 45 days. Or, if you wanted to hold out, you could literally double your money in 90 days. It was an offer no bank could even come close to matching. And this staggering, mind-boggling number, it had thousands of desperate, eager, and quite frankly, greedy people willing to risk every single dollar they owned.
So, this brings us to the biggest question of this explainer. How exactly could one man fool an entire nation? How does a literally impossible promise turn into this massive citywide obsession? We're going to explore exactly who Charles Ponzi was, why thousands of totally ordinary people were so willing to trust him with their life savings, and what secret allowed him to get so unbelievably rich so incredibly fast.
Part 1. The Dream. A poor immigrant's desperate pursuit of wealth. So let's set the scene. Charles Ponzi arrives in Boston as a young Italian immigrant carrying almost nothing to his name. He genuinely, deeply believed that America was the land of opportunity. But there was a catch. Traditional opportunity required a ton of patience, and Charles Ponzi absolutely hated patience. He completely refused to live an ordinary life. Driven by this really potent mix of raw ambition and total desperation, he just dreamed of absolute luxury. The fine suits, the expensive cars, the fame. But his actual reality? It was just a string of failed jobs. Restaurants, factories, offices, nothing stuck. He even spent some time in prison. But instead of rehabilitating him, prison really just convinced him of one thing. There absolutely had to be an easier, faster way to get the status he craved.
Fast forward to 1919. A letter shows up from Europe, and inside it is an international reply coupon. Now, this was just a simple piece of paper that let people in different countries prepay postage. Most of us would just toss it in the trash. But Ponzi, he saw a loophole. Because exchange rates had shifted so drastically after World War I, he came up with a theory. Buy these postal coupons dirt cheap overseas, bring them over to America, and exchange them for a much higher value. It's called arbitrage. And on paper, it sounded like absolute genius to anyone who listened.
But, well, here's the reality check. The actual profits from this arbitrage idea? Tiny. They were virtually non-existent, and absolutely nowhere near the 50% return he was promising people. I mean, the sheer physical logistics of moving enough of these tiny paper coupons to make millions of dollars was just absurd. So Ponzi makes a fateful decision. He pivots. Was he a misunderstood genius who found a cool loophole, or was it a total lie from the very beginning? The truth is, he completely stopped selling coupons. He started selling hope.
Part 2. The Addiction. Delivering the impossible promise. So when Ponzi first starts pitching this coupon story for investments, people naturally laughed at him. But then, something truly unbelievable happens. The first wave of investors actually get paid. Exactly as promised, they handed over their cash, and 45 days later, boom, a 50% profit. And the second that happened, a total frenzy erupted. Once word hit the streets of Boston that this crazy promise was actually real, the floodgates completely opened. It was like an addiction just took over the city. I mean, families were literally selling their homes. Businesses were taking on heavy, crippling debt just to get cash to invest. People were handing over their entire life savings without a second thought. You had these massive lines of eager investors. We're talking farmers, teachers, doctors, lawyers, wrapping endlessly around buildings. Money was pouring into Ponzi's office so fast that his clerks literally couldn't count it all. And why did everyone believe him? Well, because the cash was flowing.
And the media totally ate it up. Newspapers were literally calling him a financial genius. Because of this unbelievable flood of cash, Ponzi transformed his life overnight. He bought the luxury cars, he bought a sprawling mansion, he got those expensive suits he'd always dreamed of. He became a massive celebrity. Everyone wanted a piece of his success, and because the guy was just so incredibly charismatic, people trusted him implicitly. His public image as a total mastermind was locked in. Part 3. The Master's Secret. The terrifying truth behind the fortune. All right, so here is the big reveal, the secret that made him so unbelievably wealthy so fast.
The shocking, absolutely devastating truth was, there was almost no real business happening at all. None. Here's how it actually worked. Step 1. Ponzi takes money from new investors. Step 2. Instead of buying those postal coupons, he just keeps a massive cut of that cash to fund his mansion and luxury lifestyle. Step 3. When the early investors show up asking for their profits, he just uses the money he literally just got from the new investors to pay them off. Those early investors are thrilled. They become walking advertisements telling everyone in town that it really works. Which brings us to Step 4. That buzz attracts more victims, bringing in more money, and the vicious cycle just repeats itself.
And today, of course, we have a very specific, universally recognized name for this exact cycle of deceit: a Ponzi scheme. It's a fraudulent investing scam promising incredibly high rates of return with very little risk, generating returns for early investors with money taken straight from later investors. There were no real profits. There was no wildly successful coupon business. It was literally just an endless chain of money moving from one brand new victim to an older victim. Charles Ponzi didn't invent fraud, but his specific cycle of deceit was so incredibly damaging that the entire world universally named the crime after him.
Part 4. The Investigation. The math that broke the empire. You know, success, especially rapid, totally inexplicable success, always attracts attention. And eventually, journalists and bankers started looking past the charismatic smile and the fancy cars. They started doing the actual math on this alleged international postal coupon business. Both the government and the press started asking one very simple, very dangerous question. If this guy is making millions of dollars exchanging postal coupons, where on earth are all the coupons?
And the investigators quickly found a fatal, glaring flaw. When accountants crunched the numbers to see what it would take to actually generate the millions of dollars in profits he was paying out, they realized Ponzi would need more postal coupons than existed anywhere in the entire world. It wasn't just highly improbable, it was physically impossible. The math simply did not exist to support the empire. Part 5. The Inevitable Collapse. Panic in the streets of Boston. So the tension finally snaps. The local newspapers publish the terrifying truth, and fear just spreads instantly through the city. Those eager, excited lines of investors that used to wrap around the block, they suddenly transformed. They definitely weren't there to hand over their life savings anymore. They became this panicked, terrified mob, desperately trying to withdraw whatever money they had left.
Here's the thing about this kind of scam. It requires a constant, never-ending flow of new victims just to survive. So the second that new money stopped, the whole system completely seized up overnight. Banks instantly froze all of Ponzi's accounts. The police raided his offices. And when they finally got a look at the financial records, they found absolute zero legitimate business activity. In a matter of days, the entire financial empire collapsed. Thousands of families lost absolutely everything. Life savings vanished, businesses failed, bankruptcies went through the roof. Charles Ponzi was finally arrested and his scam was dead.
Part 6. The Legacy. His greatest creation survived him. So, Charles Ponzi gets sent to prison. He's eventually deported, and he actually lives out his final years pretty quietly in Brazil. The man who once owned mansions and commanded millions of dollars died in 1949 with almost nothing to his name. But, while the man himself faded into obscurity, his devastating blueprint certainly did not. Charles Ponzi died in 1949, but his scam, it is still very much alive today. Because that architecture of deceit he built back in the 1920s, it is the exact same blueprint being used to ruin people right now, every single day. I mean, promising impossible returns, we see that constantly in modern crypto investment scams. Paying early investors with new money, that is the literal backbone of fake trading platforms today. Gaining absolute trust? Just scroll your feed and look at the countless social media investment gurus selling you a luxury lifestyle. And the inevitable collapse? We've seen it play out on a multi-billion-dollar scale with modern fraudsters like Bernie Madoff and Alan Stanford.
So I want to leave you with this really provocative thought to end our explainer today. The greatest robberies in history happened without a single gun being fired. You see, as long as human ambition is mixed with a little desperation, and as long as people believe there is some fast, easy path to unearned wealth, there will always be someone waiting in the wings to sell them the dream. So the next time you see an impossible promise of easy money online or anywhere else, just ask yourself,
Are you looking at the next Charles Ponzi? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.